victorious living, and that's as displayed to us in Genesis, the story of Joseph's life. And the title of today's lesson is When Life is the Pits. Now, I'm sure all of us have a clue as to what that's referring to, but it was the pits for young Joseph. And I always thought of him as much younger, but he was 17 years old. I remember when I was 17, I thought I was a man. I was convinced I was there. I learned a lot in the next 4 years, and was really amazed at how smart my dad had become in that time. Yeah. It's so true. My sons went through the same process, as we all do. But anyway, today we're going to be looking in the book of Genesis, 37th chapter, and the reference is verses 1 through 36. So, in introduction, how can we be victorious over feelings of revenge, bitterness, and hatred? You imagine Joseph might have felt a little need for revenge and bitterness and hatred towards his older brothers. I think he might have felt a little of that. Bible doesn't really clearly state it, but I think it's only fair to say Joseph was a human being, and I'm sure he had all the like emotions that we have. How can we find victory in the midst of life's problems and adversity? That's a good question. We find out in the life of Joseph. God uses 1/4 of the book of Genesis, chapters 37 to 50, to record Joseph's life. Why does God record all that in such detail? Let's find out. Undoubtedly, it is because we can all easily identify with so much of his life. Joseph has to deal with much adversity, including envy, injustice, temptation, family problems, false accusations, a very broad plethora of those kinds of emotions and feelings and behaviors directed at him. He is the role model for our Journey into Victorious Living series of lessons. Joseph is a wonderful example of this fact that's found in 1 John 5:4. And I'll read. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Yeah, even our faith. Joseph was a man of faith, clearly. Joseph is the great-grandson of Abraham, grandson of Isaac, son of Jacob, also known as Israel. Joseph is now 17 years old as we begin our study of his life in Genesis 37, verses 1 and 2. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Remember who his father was? What his? Okay, never mind. I'll get to that. Okay. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Okay. In this section of Joseph's life, we can find 3 things we should do when life is the pits. First, we'll go to prayer, and Lord in prayer. Father, we come to you again just so grateful for your word, grateful for the manifestation of what right living is and how to approach our lives in reference to your purpose for our lives. Lord, we just ask now that you be with us as we go through this lesson, that you would guide and direct us in what I say, and Lord, and just give us ears to hear and open our eyes to what is present in this passage. We pray these things now in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. So, the very first point we've come to is refuse to be envious. There's a lot of envy going on with Joseph's bros. You know, they were not happy. So we meet Joseph as he brings his father an evil report concerning his half-brothers. Joseph has only one full brother. Anybody remember who that is? Benjamin. That's absolutely correct. He is less than a year old at this time. Benjamin is. So Joseph is 17. There's a big gap between him and his little brother. Joseph and Benjamin are Jacob's sons by his beloved. Anybody remember who she is? Rachel. Exactly right. For whom he worked 14 years. Now, initially, he thought he was going to get Rachel at the end of 7, because that's kind of the deal he'd struck with his father-in-law, Laban. But Laban was a sly devil, and he liked to make deals and then figure out ways to go around the end of them. But that was in Genesis 29:16 through 28. We are not told the details of the report, but this incident reveals Joseph would not go along with anything bad or hide things from his father. That's a good son. He's not going to allow his brothers to hurt their father in any way. All right. He was a faithful and honorable son. The first recorded adversity in Joseph's life is the result of favoritism shown by his father, Jacob, who loved Joseph more than his other children. That's a bad place to be when you're the dad. You've got to be equitable, because it really causes rancor amongst the troops for you not to be as, treat them all fairly. But obviously you can have in your heart favorites. Anyway, he loved Jacob more than his other children. Jacob's special love stems from Joseph being born to Jacob in his old age to his favorite wife. Now, if he was old when Joseph was born, what happened when Benjamin came along? He was really old, kind of like his grandpa, the great-granddad. Or, yeah, it'd be Jacob's grandpa. As a token of his love for Joseph, Jacob makes him a coat of many colors. This is Genesis 37:3. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Now, that's translated colors from the original, but it also is possible to translate that as many pieces. So it could have been of animal hides of different types. We just don't know. We know that it's called in most of our references as a coat of many colors. And it would have presented as different colors if it was different types of animals. The multicolored coat reached to his wrists and to his ankles. That's a pretty big coat, especially in a warm climate like Canaan. Anyway, it was a type of coat normally worn by royalty. To have that kind of cover and be fancy like it really pervaded the fact that he was a royalty of some sort. Being young and naive, the gift clearly reveals to Joseph's brother that their father favors Joseph. They don't have anything like that. As a result, we read this in Genesis 37:4. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, what was their reaction? They hated him. They hated him. And could not speak peaceably unto him. So there was always rancor in any reference that they made. If they had to speak to him, they were not nice. Also, Joseph has a dream that implies he will one day reign over his family. Being young and naive, Joseph shares the dream with his pals, his brothers. This only adds to their resentment of him. We see this in Genesis 37:5-8. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf. This isn't sounding good to his brothers, I can guarantee you. And his brethren said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. Now Joseph continues to have dreams about his family bowing down before him. Therefore, his brothers are envious and hate him more and more. Genesis 37, 9-11. And he dreamed yet another dream and told it his brethren. You'd think he would have learned his lesson of that first one, but he didn't. Told it to his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. Well, it's clear what he's talking about. He has 11 brothers. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And what happened when Jacob heard this story? He rebuked him. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. One particular day, Joseph's brothers are feeding Jacob's flock. Concerned about his sons, Jacob sends Joseph to check on them. This is Genesis 37, 12-14. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here am I. And he said to him, go, I pray thee, see whether it will be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. When his brothers see him at a distance, what happens? According to Genesis 37:18. We read now. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. That's pretty powerful. We know that brothers seem to be involved in murder against one another early in the scriptures, and even to this day. But that's pretty, man, you're going to kill your little brother that you know is the apple of your father's eye. That's really not a kind thing to do. All right, so the brothers decide to kill Joseph, put him into a pit, and then tell their father he was eaten by a wild animal. They then say, we shall see what will become of his dreams. This is found in Genesis 37:20. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. They're not even being particular about which pit they put him in. And we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. Now, they have not even thinking clearly, because in the scriptures, dreams are usually messages being sent to someone from the Lord. And I think at some point they'll come to understand this. However, the oldest brother, Reuben, intervenes and suggests that killing Joseph is excessive. He proposes they just put Joseph into a pit and let nature take its course. Reuben offers this plan so he can return later to rescue Joseph and take him back to his father. Reuben, being the eldest, he had little wisdom in his mind, knew that he didn't want to hurt his dad like this. And Reuben heard it. This is 37:21-22. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him again to his father. Years later, in Egypt, when Joseph learns about Reuben saving his life, he's moved to tears, because he thought all of them were against him. Genesis 42:22-24 is where we read this. And Reuben answered them, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child, and ye would not hear. Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. And they knew not that Joseph understood them. for he spake unto them by an interpreter. And he turned himself about from them and wept. So Joseph was moved by that. The fact that Reuben had actually had a degree of love for him and was shamed and sorry by the fact that their dad was told that he had been devoured. And they knew not that Joseph understood them. Okay, and he turned himself about from them and wept, and returned to them again and communed with them. And at this point, he's going to play with them a little bit. And took from them Simeon and bound him before their eyes. Oh man, that they had to be wondering what in the world's going on. From time to time, we all face the temptation to feel envious. When we see someone receive an honor, promotion, or blessing we think is undeserved. At those times, we must be very careful because of this ominous warning in James 3:16. And I read, "For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work." That's all true. So, when life is the pits, it's tempting to look at others whose lives seem to be going great and be envious of their blessings. Therefore, when you are in the pits, refuse to be envious. And, number 2 point, reflect on the long term. We see this in Genesis 23 to 35. Now, following Reuben's suggestion, Joseph's brothers strip him of his robe and throw him into a dry pit. At least it was a dry pit. I mean, yuck. And in that country, pits are usually occupied by these things known as vipers. They're not good things to be put in a pit with. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat. This is 37, 23, and 24. His coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Well, that'd be another problem in a desert, wouldn't it? You're in there in that pit in the heat of the day and no water. And they said one to another, "We are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul." We didn't know this before, did we? With Joseph in the pit, his brothers are going to sit down now and eat a meal. And it not recorded here, but it is recorded in Genesis 42:21, where they're talking, looking back, and they say this, "And they said one to another, We are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul." He was pleading and begging them for his life. "When he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us." They're seeing this as a punishment that's coming upon them now when they have to be there begging for food for their families. So as the brothers sit down to eat, they can hear Joseph nearby begging. So when life is the pits and you feel like no one cares, the pit just seems to become deeper and darker. You are ill and no one calls. You have marital problems and can't find a compassionate ear. A loved one dies and you feel forgotten. At those times, you may experience this that's in Psalm 69:20. And in 69:20 reads as follows: "Reproach hath broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. And I looked for some to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none." That's what Joseph was feeling there. Now these men are feeling this. However, an even worse situation is knowing someone else is in the pits and not doing something to let them know you care. The Christian life is not just praying, memorizing scriptures, attending Bible study and worship services. Jesus said this in John 14:15. "If ye love me, keep my commandments." That's an important one to recall in these moments. How do we keep all of Christ's commandments? Let's look at Galatians 6:2 for the answer to that question. And we read, Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. You got to pick up and help the load. You know, and if you think about when Christ was carrying his cross to Calvary, he got to the point that he was collapsing and couldn't pick it back up, and they grabbed a man off the street. That was sharing a load as an example to us. So, as Joseph's brothers, with the exception of Reuben, are eating their meal and ignoring Joseph's pleas, they see a caravan of Ishmaelites approaching. Ishmaelites also are called Midianites and are descendants of Abraham through Hagar. These traders have camels, these ones that are approaching them, loaded with goods and headed for Egypt. Genesis 37:25. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked. And behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. Judah suggests they sell Joseph to them. Now that's a really kindly thing for brother and sister. I'm going to sell him, and he'll be a slave now. Not good at all. But we know that this was prophesied and told to Abraham that at a certain point, all of your people are going to be in slavery for 400 years. So this is just a step along that way. Anyway, Judah suggests they sell Joseph to them, and why should they kill him when there is more profit in selling him? Therefore, they sell Joseph for 20 pieces of silver, or about 8 ounces. This is in Genesis 37:26-28. And it reads, And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. Now he's thinking about the fact that he's their flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now I checked the spot market price of silver. That was as of last Friday. And that price was $30.79 per ounce. At today's price, Joseph was sold for $246.32. Their brother for less than $250. That sickens me. How can you do that to your brother? And these were his brothers. When life is the pits, things sometimes get worse before they get better. As in the life of Joseph, for days he travels as a slave of the Ishmaelites. He probably lies under the stars at night, looking toward heaven and wondering why God is allowing this to happen to him. Of course, that's conjecture on our part, but I think he might have been. Joseph needs a word from God, but God is silent. Perhaps Joseph was feeling like the psalmist in Psalm 22:2. And it reads like this, O my God, I cry in the daytime, but thou hearest not, and in the night season, and am not silent. Reuben has no part in selling Joseph. Therefore, when he returns to the pit and finds Joseph is gone, what's he do? He tears his clothes in grief, because he knows how this is going to impact his dad. To cover up their evil deeds, the brothers kill a goat and dip Joseph's coat in the blood. They bring the coat back to their father, telling him they found the coat and wonder if it is Joseph's. Now, as they expect, Jacob recognizes the coat and assumes that wild animals have killed Joseph. Jacob mourns for many days. He is so overcome with grief, none of his children can console him. Now, yes, Reuben rent his clothes and in grief, and he mourned for this. But did he tell his dad when they got back that that's all a line of crap? No, he doesn't. he goes along with it because he fears the consequence. Kind of like what happened when God sought Adam in the garden. He just started to, well, Lord, that woman you gave me, it's the same part of our nature, all of our natures, that comes up again and again. All right, so when life is the pits, things sometimes get worse before they get better. As in the life of Joseph, for days he travels as a slave. Reuben has no part again, and Joseph is overwhelmed with grief. I'll read now Genesis 37, 31 to 35. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in blood, and they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no." And he knew it and said, "It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces." And Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. So things looked hopeless for Joseph. However, when life is the pits, refuse to be envious and reflect on the long term. And finally, point 3, rely on God's promises. In Egypt, the Midianites sell Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, who is the captain of the guard. The Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. In Hebrew, this is kind of the same word that would be used for eunuch, but the word also signifies not only eunuchs, but also chamberlains, courtiers, and officers. So this is a high-powered man that he's been sold to. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. So this means that Potiphar, the commanding officer of the royal bodyguards, like the Secret Service agents who guard President Trump, Joseph doesn't know God is placing him in a strategic location for fulfilling his purpose for his life. When the Lord had earlier promised the land of Canaan to Abraham's descendants, he told Abraham they would be strangers in a land not their own. This is the leading into that. There's no way Joseph can understand God's good purpose at this time. Just as God has a good reason for allowing Joseph's life to be the pits, the same is true when our lives are the pits. Joseph's life is an illustration of a wonderful promise for us to remember when life is the pits. It is so familiar that if I just mention the reference, you can probably quote the verse. But it is not just enough to quote it, we must believe it. The verse, Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. And that's what Joseph's calling was. The promise is, and we know that all things work, and they do. This verse doesn't say all things that happen to us are good. They are not. It doesn't say God causes all things to happen to us. He doesn't. However, it does say God uses all things that happen in our lives, even the very bad things, and causes good to come out of them. Romans 8:28 cannot be properly understood without understanding the next verse, Romans 8:29. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. So when life is the pits, God is sculpting our lives with the hammer of adversity to make us more and more like Jesus. Because God worked in Joseph's life, when we are in the pits, we can be assured that in his time, God will bring something good out of our adversity too. We can be confident God will keep this wonderful promise that we find in Psalm 34:17. The righteous cry, and the Lord heareth, and delivereth them out of all their troubles. So when life is the pits, refuse to be envious, reflect on the long term, rely on God's promises. Next week, we will continue our journey in Lesson 2, how to terminate temptation. Just Genesis 39:1 to 23. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.